Hey guys, a big second day at the Whiskey Creek Film Festival for me. Here's my report on the movies I saw. The first movie I saw was The Way, Way Back. This is a coming-of-age comedy directed by Nat Faxon and Jim Rash. Once again, I hope I'm pronouncing those names correctly. And it's about a 14-year-old boy named Duncan who goes on summer vacation with his mother and his mother's boyfriend and is basically miserable almost the entire time. The boy is played by a young actor named Liam James, who's terrific here. He's a real actor to look at, or to keep an eye on. He's going to have a big career, I suspect. His mother is played by Toni Collette from Little Miss Sunshine, and his father is played by not his father, his mother's boyfriend is played by Steve Carell, and the Carell character is really kind of interesting because, as you might expect by being played by Steve Carell, he's a bit of a jerk and he's definitely insensitive, especially to the Liam James character, always criticizing him, but and there are things you learn about him during the movie that are really quite unsavory. But you do get the feeling that he really does care for the main character's mother, and he really does want to form a family. He just doesn't really seem to be able to get past his own bad habits. So, although he is kind of a jerk, he still is kind of sympathetic too. But this movie isn't about him. This movie is about the Liam James character, and he's just very, very good. He's a very real feeling character. He's like shy and introverted. He's sensitive. I identified a lot with him, and that's probably why I like the movie so much. Even though he's miserable almost the entire time, there are two sources of happiness for him during this vacation. There's the pretty neighbor. There's the pretty girl who lives next door to his mom's boyfriend Summerhouse. She's played by Anne-Sophie Robb, who's really good here, and she actually does create a real character for herself, even though she is more or less defined as the boy's love interest. And then, more importantly, there's Sam Rockwell. And Sam Rockwell plays the manager of the local water park, and he's just hilarious here. He just dominates the entire movie, or every scene he's in. He's funny, he's charming, he even has some really touching emotional moments with him. You just have to watch the movie just to get how good of a performance this is. I mean, Sam Rockwell's good in everything, but this is probably one of the best things I've seen him in since Moon, which I also saw at the Whiskey Creek Film Festival, by the way, a few years back. But anyway, he seems to be drawn to the Liam James character, whose name is Duncan, because he realizes that he's not having fun, but he realizes there's a kid's really smart, but he just seems to want to make sure that this kid has a good time, and the two of them strike up a friendship, and Duncan even starts working at the water park. And yeah, that is pretty much the plot here, although there are a few problems here and there. For instance, Duncan keeps his job at the water park a secret from his mother for no real reason. And some characters, there's Allison Janney, who's the Anne-Sophie Robb character's mother, who's a bit too broad and a bit obnoxious. But still, this is a very funny movie, very charming movie. I liked it a lot. It's one of my favorite movies at the festival this year. And in comparison to The Kings of Summer, which is the other coming-of-age comedy at the festival this year, I think it's better, because while The Kings of Summer is very well directed and has some very intense moments outside of the comedy, it feels more gimmicky, and doesn't have as many big laughs, and doesn't have some of the same emotionally satisfying moments that The Way, Way Back has. So while I recommend them both to fans of the genre, I say The Way, Way Back is better. If nothing else, you have to see it for Sam Rockwell's performance. He's brilliant here. If you're a fan of Sam Rockwell or you just like this sort of comedy, watch this movie. You will not be disappointed. The next movie I saw was Still Mine. This is a Canadian movie written and directed by a man named Michael McGowan, which is about an elderly man played by the great James Cromwell. He decides to build a smaller, more manageable house for himself and his wife, played by Genevieve Bujold. That's right. There are 2 different movies about people who decide to build their own houses during this festival. But aside from that, there's very few ways a movie like this and The Kings of Summer could be any differently. While The Kings of Summer were all teenagers, James Cromwell and Genevieve Bujold are in their 80s. And while nobody seems to find out that these kids have built their own house in the woods, everybody seems to be on Cromwell and Bujold for building this house. Although, it must be said, and one of the reasons he's building this house is that he knows that his wife is beginning to have to suffer dementia and possibly Alzheimer's, and is getting worse, and he wants to have the house built so that she can have a safer place to live. And the bulk of the movie is both about their relationship and about how he has to fight with the local authorities and bureaucrats to make sure his house gets approved. And this does basically the reason to see this movie is for those 2 main performances, Cromwell and Bujold. Cromwell's been really great in supporting performances forever. It seems that he was in LA Confidential and Babe, and he played George H.W. Bush in W. He's always good, and this is one of the few times he's ever been given a lead role, and he just nails it here. He's just so natural here, so just embodies his part as this stubborn old man who knows what he wants to do and won't let anybody get in his way. And Bujold is also very good as his wife, who is slowly beginning to suffer from dementia. Although maybe like one too many scenes where she just kind of blankly stares into the camera as a way of showing that she's kind of slipped out of awareness for a little bit. So these 2 have great chemistry together. They have their dialogue scenes between each other are both really touching and really funny at times. And there are a couple of memorable side characters too, like his neighbor and his neighbor's wife and the Cromwell character's lawyer and their son. They don't have as much screen time, but they do contribute quite well to when they show up in the movie. And this movie is apparently based on a true story, so I guess that kind of excuses some of the cliches and kind of like anti-bureaucratic raging against the machine sort of thing going on here. So I have to mention that, yeah, we all know bureaucracies suck sometimes, but the thing about this movie is, I think it seems to understand that bureaucracy is there for a reason, but it seems to believe that the James Cromwell character should be able to get past that just because he's old and he knows what he's doing. And yeah, I can see how that makes for a good story, but I don't entirely agree with that, but really, that's not that important, because it's just some aside things you discuss about the movie when the movie itself is the main deal here. It's a very moving movie, very powerful performances from Cromwell and Bujold. And yeah, this is just a very good movie, very good acting, and I say it's well worth watching. Next thing I saw was a series of short films, or more accurately, 4 short films and 1 movie that was just about feature length. Now, unfortunately, unlike last year, none of the movies that I saw are available on YouTube now, so you just kind of have to take my word for it for how good they were. The first one I saw was called Smorgasbord, and it was pretty underwhelming. It was very pretty. It was basically a shot of a smorgasbord plate with animated flowers and stuff coming out of it. But yeah, it didn't feel like a short film so much as a piece of video art, like something you would see on a wall somewhere in somebody's house or in a museum. It felt like almost like a visual effect sampler in search of a movie. But it was only about 2 minutes long, so what could you expect, I guess? Next movie I saw was a 9-minute long short called Dinosaur, which was utterly fantastic. I have to give a shout out to the directors, Epic Mitchell and Aaron Gary, I should say. They just use a combination of all sorts of different animation styles and film styles, some stock footage, some claymation, some hand-drawn animation, all sorts of stuff to almost like create a brief comic history of the world or history of the universe. It's incredibly entertaining. Just a delightful 9 minutes of animation. I loved every second of it. Next thing we saw was another animated short. It's called Hello Stranger by John Acker. John Acker has his own YouTube page. His name is spelled Johnakre. So you want to check him out, but unfortunately Hello Stranger is not one of the videos he's uploaded onto YouTube. But it's a kind of a kind of a strange movie about this man, this old claymation man who seems to be so lonely. He keeps trying to find out ways to eat alongside his shadow, and when it turns out he doesn't have enough light to cast shadow, he starts setting up random stuff. It's really bizarre. I can't just describe it. I can't do it justice. Let's just hope John Acker puts it up on his page, and maybe I'll put a link to it on my YouTube page or my Facebook page when he does. And the last short film that I saw was a short documentary entitled Remembering Keith Pazinski. It's 8 minutes and 37 seconds long. It's just this really sweet and touching tribute to the UPS guy for a certain neighborhood of Minneapolis. Like, I should mention all these shorts here were made by Minnesotan filmmakers. Yeah, just a bunch of people just remembering how happy and nice that this UPS guy was, how much they all enjoyed having him, how much he always went out of his way to help them when they had a package or when they had something that he felt they might need help with. It just felt like a sweet, comforting, just a comfort food was short. I just really liked it. You should feel like hugging yourself the entire time. Although I did find it a little bit odd that they didn't seem to interview anybody who was a member of his family or who knew him outside of his work. But that might be kind of the point how the work you do affects people in ways you might not even suspect. So yeah, just a wonderful little short that was. And finally, the meat of the Minnesota Films portion of the show was a 56-minute long documentary entitled Girl from Birch Creek. Now, Girl from Birch Creek is a documentary about the first female justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court. And it is a very good, educational sort of documentary about this woman whose name is Rosalie Wall, and just does a great job of letting you know who she is through interviews with her and through many of the people who she interacted with during her legal career. It has a great way of showing you the context in which she grew up, just how sexist society was when she was growing up in Kentucky and later working in Minnesota. And just how groundbreaking it was that a woman was nominated to the Minnesota Supreme Court, which of course now has equal representation of men and women, or more or less equal representation. Sometimes it's more men, sometimes it's more women. It just depends on which court it is. But yeah, it is a very effective documentary. There are some parts that are almost there's one part near the beginning where they're trying they're showing how society viewed women. They show like clips from sitcoms like Father Knows Best, and they showed some of the Nixon tapes where they talk about the possibility of nominating women to judicial positions. It's almost hilarious in its blatant sexism and misogyny. It's almost unintentionally hilarious, while you're still just cringing at just that's what society was like. And yeah, that's a very good movie. Once again, the documentary is called Girl from Birch Creek. Yeah, I think it was a very good one to watch. The next movie I saw was another documentary. It's called 20 Feet from Stardom. And it has a really interesting thing. It's one of those documentaries that's really important because it has a very interesting subject that you might not have thought about making a movie about. The subject of this movie is background singers. You know, all the singers who perform the background music or music alongside the headliners of an album or a concert, who do a whole lot of work, but you never really hear about them, and only occasionally do they ever break into the mainstream. And I just thought this was a really wonderful documentary because it had, well, of course, it has all sorts of great music, and it has all sorts of interviews with these people who tell you all about how much they love singing and how much they love being part of the industry, and some of the frustration that comes with never being truly appreciated. I mean, there's one really powerful moment where one of the singers describes hearing one of the songs that she helped perform on the radio, and then having her music credited to somebody other than her, because of course she's a background singer and she couldn't get all the credits. But yeah, there are several different singers who are focused on here, particularly Darlene Love and Lisa Fisher, Mary Clayton. They have a lot. They're very much the focus of most of these interviews. Although there are many other background singers and famous singers too. Like people like Bruce Springsteen, David Bowie, Stevie Wonder, and even Mick Jagger all show up to talk about how much they appreciated the talent of these background singers. Yeah, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of talk about the possibility of breaking into stardom, which is also where the title comes from, 20 Feet from Stardom, because they seem to be almost there. And the idea that some of these people seem to be very eager to become stars, and some of them are perfectly content being background singers too. And just the idea there, the fact that very few of them are able to break out into solo albums, even if they want to, and sometimes they get to the point where they are so eager to become solo artists that they almost lose their musical career almost entirely. So yeah, I really like this documentary. If you like music, if you're a big fan of the different artists who I mentioned before, I would really recommend this because it has just a great piece of musical history that most people don't think about. I say see it. And the last movie I saw tonight was Fruitvale Station. This is probably among the most well-known movies at the film festival, and the one I was most excited to see, which is kind of why I waited until later the second night to see it. This is based on a true story about the New Year's 2008 incident where a young man named Oscar Grant was shot and killed on the Fruitvale train station in the Bay Area. And this movie is not a depiction of that incident per se, although it does happen. This is more of almost a day in the life sort of thing. It tries to recreate the 24 hours leading up to that event, just in the life of Oscar Grant. And the movie was written and directed by Ryan Coogler, a 27-year-old from that area, and you really get that sense because he has a great sense of the atmosphere and the people who live there. But really, the thing that people are getting most excited about, and very well deserved, is the main character, the Oscar Grant character. He's played by Michael B. Jordan. And Michael B. Jordan's been on the cusp of stardom for a long time. He's been in lots of critically acclaimed TV shows, like he was on the first season of The Wire. He was on Friday Night Lights for a while. And lately he's been getting lots of good film roles. He was in Chronicle. He had a really great role in the movie Chronicle. I recommend you check that movie out if you haven't seen it. But now this is one of his first real lead roles that he's been able to take, and it's a really great role for him to sink his teeth into, even though it's not a very extrovert role. It really is, basically requires him to be casual and natural, just as if he's been living the life that Oscar Grant lived, and he's just really good here. I mean, and you might expect that since this guy was shot and killed by a police officer without provocation, they might have tried to turn him into some sort of a saint or some sort of a folk hero or something. They don't do that. They basically show him as a human being, who has character flaws. I mean, he sometimes cheats on his girlfriend. He sometimes dealt drugs. He has a bad temper. He has a bad habit of doing lots of posturing when he feels his masculinity is threatened. But he's also just a nice person. He helps people when they need help. He loves his girlfriend. He loves his 4-year-old daughter. He wants to help his mother. He wants to get his life back on track. I mean, he knows he's been in trouble. We see a very powerful flashback from when he was in jail for dealing drugs, and his mother visits him, basically to tell him she can't visit him anymore. And his mother is played by Octavia Spencer. She won an Oscar for her role in The Help a couple years ago, and she's just really good here. And the scenes between him and Octavia Spencer and him and Melanie Diaz, who plays his girlfriend, are very powerful and probably the most powerful parts of the movie, leading up to this like climactic showdown at the BART station, which is a very powerfully shot scene. Basically, because they don't try to make it any more spectacular or any more dramatic than it really was, and it was a really powerful incident. I mean, the movie actually opens with cell phone footage. People recorded the shooting on their cell phones, and that's just a really important way to open up the movie, because it not only does it show you that you know right at the outside where this guy is heading, it also allows them to just foreshadow the events leading up to it. I mean, just the idea of just when you see him walking through or driving through the city and you see the trains just zipping past him here and there, it just gives it sort of an ominous feeling to it. I mean, even though he has no idea what's coming ahead, you do, and it just makes it more and more suspenseful and more dramatic as it goes on. But really, even if this movie wasn't fated to culminate in a fatal shooting, it still would be really good. And just because the performances are so good, just because it has such a steady directorial hand and such a great sense of atmosphere for these different areas. I mean, if somebody were to walk into this movie a few minutes late after the opening sequence for the cell phone footage, they could very well be forgiven for thinking it was just some sort of like slice of life drama about living in the inner city in the West Coast. And that would have been a very effective movie in its own right. But the fact that this is a true story, the fact that this was a real guy who was trying to get his life back on track, but it was just stopped by the stupidity of this police officer, really makes it all the more powerful. I mean, if you'll allow me a bit of philosophizing here, Aristotle said that a tragedy something could only be considered a tragedy if the hero was a great man, like a king or something. I think a movie like Fruitvale Station says that a man doesn't have to be great to be tragic, simply because this was a man who loved his girlfriend, who wanted the best for his daughter, and was trying to be a good person, even though he had some trouble along the way, and his life just cut short right when he was trying his best to redeem himself. and that makes it just as tragic as any of the major stories of people's falls I've ever seen. So yeah, this is a real heartbreaker of a movie. You could easily be in tears by the end of this, especially the very end where they have some documentary footage here. I'm not going to tell you exactly what it is, but just some real heartbreaking footage near the end, during the credits, and yeah, this is a really powerful movie. I definitely recommend that you see Fruitvale Station. And yeah, that's all the movies I saw today. I have one more movie to see tomorrow. That's the free family screening of a movie called Standing Up. And then, after that, I'll post my review of that in my summary of the festival. So, till then, see you tomorrow.